Hello, our names are Laith, Veer, and Aniket, and this project is the After AP final project for AP CSA. Firstly, the dataset was generally simple, so we struggled very little. Still, the main challenge was that in declaring the initial variables, not only did we cover the wrong variables, like protein and fat instead of fiber and cups, but we also used the wrong variable types. For example, at first, all variables were type int and not type int and type double. This meant that our syntax was right, but our logic was wrong. It also meant that many of our methods returning these values wrongfully return an int value, which had to be tediously fixed. As for what we learned, the scanner system was our main accomplishment. We doubted our ability to scan as well as splitting and parsing file lines because all these skills were rarely utilized in Code HS or in the course in general.
The 11th lab was more difficult than the dataset lab because it delved into the topic of inheritance. The main challenge for this lab was actually constructor, which tends to be the easiest in most projects. The reason this constructor was difficult was because we assumed that the arrays of ranks, suits, and values were equal length. However, in any game of cards, there tends to be a few suits, like hearts or spades. This meant that the constructor could not be a single loop that went through each index and created a new object, but rather it had to be a double loop. This misunderstanding cost us time and had us redoing multiple activities. Still, however, we did master a few things, like the shuffle and the deal methods. The shuffle relied on randomly picking a card and switching it with the current index, and the deal simply picked some card at the end of the deck, removing it from the list of all the undealt cards and adding it to the dealt cards list.
Overall, a lot was learned over the course of this project. In the dataset lab, we learned that splitting file lines is relevant to any data analysis in code and made useful with parsing the string into multiple variables. Also, we learned to pay attention to what variables are being asked about in the prompt, and that min-max values in Java are helpful when creating comparison methods, as we had to do at the end of the lab. As for the 11th lab, we learned to be familiar with what the target game design is before starting the coding process at all to reduce error and maximize efficiency. Also, we had to be careful with arrays versus lists because we often used array methods instead of the intended list methods like size parentheses or get at I. Additionally, the multi-object nature of this lab led us to keep track of which classes contained which methods. In general, the core lessons of this project were to understand the general plan of the game at hand, read instructions with caution, and to be concise. Thank you for listening and have a great summer.